Alrighty, so recently I've been playing a couple of games on my phone, and one of the games that I keep seeing sort of appear in different styles is these hook games or these swinging games. I think the most recent one to be really popular was Stickman Hook. Other games, so like From Dusk to Dawn has been around for a long time. But basically, this sort of genre of games has done really well on the Android App Store. The actual mechanism that these games sort of utilize is actually really simple. And so I'm going to make a really quick tutorial today. Basically, how to make a game with this style. Just a super simple game. And I guess, if you're new to Unity, or if you've used Unity a little bit, but you're not sort of familiar with these mechanisms, or these these components, then I hope that I can sort of shed some light on that. And I hope someone will find this video a little bit handy. Alrighty, so this is my second time trying to make this video. My first try, I realized was really long. I tried to make a whole game. I think I just made, I tried to sort of set my scope a little too large. This is a little bit like what the game looked like. It was really simple, but I think the video ended up being about 30 or 40 minutes, which I think is just a little bit long. So I decided I'd make another video, and in this one, I'll just make the parts that matter, which I think is just the hooking mechanic. And once you've got that hooking mechanic, then you can kind of do whatever you like with it. So I'm going to go ahead and do a new project. I'm going to call it hooking tutorial simple. Of course, I'm going to change the template to 2D. I don't want any standard assets, anything like that. And then I'll go ahead and create the project. Alrighty, so it's loaded up. So I decided this version might be better for a couple of reasons. A, because I think that the length of the other one made it a little bit arduous to watch. I felt really bored when I edited it. And B, because if you want to make a game with this mechanic, it might be that you want to make an entirely different game to the one that I created the tutorial for. You might have a game in mind already, and you might just want to be able to add a hooking mechanic to it. So I think just doing this part specifically, I think would be a much better watch, or I'm sorry, regardless. Anyway, so new project. You can do this, of course, with your existing project. Doesn't really matter, as long as you have a player and an object you want to attach to your player to hook from. So you can go up here to assets first. I'm actually just going to create a couple of folders down here. I'm going to create a folder for scripts, because I'm going to need some separation here, or at least a little bit of organization. Prefabs. Whoa, prefabs. And another folder for sprites. Easy. Alright, so I'm just going to go into sprites. I'm just going to go ahead and use some default sprites. Obviously, it's not worth making any art here. You might already have art for your game. It doesn't really matter for this tutorial. Circle, so I've created a square, a circle, just drag them into the scene. The square I'm going to decide is going to be my hinge, so the thing that I hook onto. And the circle I'm going to call my player. Easy. Alright, cool. So my player's down here. Oh, I need to stop it from following the player. And my hinge is up here. So this could be whatever object you want to hook onto. It doesn't have to be a square. It can be whatever you like. Anyway, I'm going to go to the object I want to hook onto. I'm going to add component, and I'm going to make that a hinge joint 2D. Awesome. I'm also going to go up here to tag, and I'm going to give it a tag because the script is going to iterate through all of the objects like this in your scene, and it's going to hook onto the object which is closest to the player. You might not want to do it in this way, but this might be the easiest way to do it. Otherwise, you can probably change this a little bit, and it'll work for what you want to do with it. The full tutorial that I made for sort of going the entire way through making a game with this mechanic is really long, but if someone does want to watch it, then I'm happy to upload it as well. If anyone watches this video, that is. Either way, it doesn't really matter. Anyway, so tags, new tag, and I'm going to call this hinge. So I'm going to have a group of tags which are hinge, and any object with that tag will be iterated through when finding the nearest object. So I'm going to go back to the object, go hinge, and tag it like so. Awesome. Alrighty. Then I'm going to go ahead and pull this into my prefabs folder, because I want these to be prefabs so I can instantiate them through code like that. And player, I'm going to give it a rigid body 2D and a circle collider. It doesn't actually really matter. It doesn't really need a circle collider. And I'm going to pull that into there as well. So they're both now prefabs. Their color should change to blue to indicate that they are. You notice here, if we were to assign the player as the rigid body, as the connected body, that you can notice the hinge mechanic as it works, as it operates. Actually, right now I think they'll both fall. But if I was to freeze the X and Y of this, like so, now you'll notice that the object will swing around the hinge like a pendulum, but there is no indicator to show that they're attached. Alright, so I'm going to stop that now, and then I'm going to go ahead and create my script for iterating through these objects. Alright, so I'm going to go here to scripts, right click, create new, and script. I'm also going to go ahead and unconnect this to my player. Dissociate my player from my rigid body 2D connected body, because I don't want them associated to begin with. I would prefer to do this through code. I think it makes more sense with the way that we're going to iterate through. So I'm going to go ahead and call this hinge movement because it's going to be attached to the player. Alright, so after that script's created, just double clicking it and going into it, we can now write this script. So I'm going to do, first of all, I'm going to do a private bool for grabbing. This is so I can separate events and dictate things whether or not the player is currently grabbing an object. It's important for attaching and detaching to propel a player forward, I guess. So I'm just going to add that there, super simple. I'm also just going to keep this as simple as possible. I think the first time I did this, I think I made it a little too complicated. I think it's better just to keep it really, really obvious and really easy to understand. Then I'm going to go into update. I'm going to create a couple of loops for different states of the mouse. So if mouse button, if input dot mouse button down. So this is returned. The frame, the left mouse button is pressed. I'm going to go if input dot get mouse button. This is returned in all frames that the mouse button is pressed. I'm going to do one more, which is going to be the frame that the left mouse button is released. So 0 is the key code for left. It's also corresponds to touch events and hold events on Android or iOS. So if you do decide that your game should be for Android or iOS, this script should work too. It should be no different. All right, then I'm going to make another method for returning the closest object. So I'm going to call this, or it's going to return an object, obviously. So game object. I'm going to call this find nearest, like that, and eventually it'll have to return an object actually, but I'll probably not do that just yet because I haven't decided what I'm going to call the object that it returns. First, I'm going to create an array, and it's going to be hinges. So hinges being all the nearby objects with the hinge tag that we created earlier. And then I'm going to go ahead and populate that array by going hinges equals game object dot find game objects with tag, and the tag we created, which is a string value, I believe was just hinge. Let me just double check that. It's worth doing, of course. So prefabs player, hinge, and the tag was indeed hinge. I might just update these prefabs. I'm not sure if I did, so I'm just going to drag them back onto their spot like that. Yeah, so they have the tag hinge. Awesome. So this should be fine then. So iterate through that to populate the hinges array of game objects. I'm then going to go ahead and go game object. I'm going to call it, I'll call it closest. So yeah, this is going to be the object that we return eventually. It's going to be null for now. We'll obviously populate that later, and I'll just make it at the end return, so it just gets rid of that underlying red line. Cool, so it's going to start as nothing. That makes sense. I'm then going to go ahead and create a float for the distance. So float distance, I'm going to make that float equal to math f dot infinity. So it can start off as infinite distance. I think this is better because you've got to go backwards. So vector 3, and then position. Why did I make that a uppercase? Equals transform, so equals the player's current position or whichever object this is attached to currently. So it doesn't have to be the player. It can be whatever object you want to hook onto the object that has the tag we're iterating through. Awesome. All right, now we want to iterate through all of these objects. So we're going to go for each, and it's going to be for each game object, of course, which we're going to call game object, or go for game object, in hinges, so that array that we just populated. And then we're going to go vector3 again, the difference, which is going to be the game object, its transform minus the position transform. So, transform the position minus the position of the game object. All right, awesome. Now we're going to go ahead and create another float, and this one's going to be car distance for current distance equals difference dot square magnitude. Awesome. And now, so we can update this so that if it is closer than the object we've already iterated through, we make sure that we say that. So we're going to go current distance is less than distance, then closest equals the current game object, and distance is updated to equal current distance. Awesome, so this should populate a list of hinges from the tags in the scene, and then it should return the closest one of those objects. Easy, great. All right, so go back up to the loops that we made earlier, and we'll start off by the frame that the mouse button is pressed, so the left mouse button is pressed. And in that frame, we just want to make sure that grabbing is true. Awesome. We want to then go down to the frames in which the mouse button is held down. Go game object, closest equals find nearest. I probably should have called this find closest, but it doesn't make a big difference really. And then in the event that grabbing is true, say if grabbing equals true. So actually, it's easier to do it like this, isn't it? So if grabbing is the same as if grabbing is true, because it's a bool. We'll go closest dot get component in children, and rigid body 2D dot connected. Sorry, that's actually what I want to do. I don't want to do rigid body 2D. I want to go hinge joint 2D. I'm so used to going rigid body for adding force. Connected body equals game object dot get component. Whoa, control F there. Equals game object dot get component in children rigid body 2D. Awesome. So that should do what we want to do. And once we've done that, we want to make sure grabbing is no longer true, because if we don't do this, it'll continuously hook on to the nearest object, which won't allow the player to build up momentum if that's what you're trying to do, which most of the time is. All right, now back down to get mouse button up. And here we'll go ahead and create another array, which will be the hinges again. So the objects that we decide are hinges. That's something I do often. Hinges. And we'll populate that again the same way we did before. So hinges equals game object dot find with tag, objects with tag, and that tag is hinge. And then we're going to go ahead and iterate through again. And this part will just be for detaching to any object that the player is currently connected to. There's definitely a more succinct way to do this. This might be a bit of a sort of hungry way to do it, so it's probably not the best way to do it, but this way as well should work absolutely fine. And here we'll go get object in children. Whoa, that's not what I want to do. Actually, it's basically the same. And it's going to be the hinge joint 2D dot connected body equals null. So this would just be to detach any of these objects from the player when the mouse button is brought up, because we don't want the player to be connected to anything when they're not pressing. You can change this as if you want. If you want to change this slightly, there's a whole bunch of ways you could do this. this is not the best way or the only way or anything like that. We actually don't need start, so I'm just going to get rid of it. Just going to go ahead and save that. This for some reason was not called what it should have been, which is a bit weird. I don't know why that happened, but I'm just going to go ahead and fix that. Just my IDE being a little bit weird. Yours probably didn't do that. And now I should be able to go to the player. Cool, and add that script to the player. Awesome, so now we'll notice that if we don't press anything, player false. But if we do press left click and we hold it, we hook onto the object like a pendulum, and we release, we release. We'll notice that if we add more of these objects to the scene, some more of these hinge objects we created, which again can be whatever object, whoa, that you want your player to hook onto, like that. Now you notice that we're attached to whatever one is the closest. Whichever one's the closest. Awesome. The last thing I'm going to do is draw a line between the player and the object. I'm also going to go to the camera. I'm going to change this to black because I just think it looks better and easier to see what's going on. The last thing we want to do is create a line between the player and the hinge, just so you can sort of visualize the way that the hinge works. I think you almost always have some way to indicate this in a hinge or in a game with a hook mechanic like that. So I think it makes sense just to include that now. So I'm back in the script now, and the way we're going to do this is with a line renderer. So I'm actually going to go back to the player quickly. I'm going to add component, and the component is going to be the line renderer. Sweet. Awesome. All right, the rest we can do from here. Might as well just an update because we're just doing it really, really simple. I'm going to go line renderer, which I'm just going to call LR for line renderer, will be generated from the current line generator that we just added to the player. Cool. And the start color, it doesn't really matter because we're using a specific material anyway, but we would just say it's blue. And the material, this part is really important. You can use whatever material you like, of course. For the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to go one that I know you have, and so that's going to be shader.find, and it's going to be particles /alpha blended pre-multiply. Cool. Alright, so that should be one that you have. If this doesn't render correctly, then I'll know that I've not typed it correctly. Then I'll go set width. And this is of course for the, it's actually I guess an old method that's not used anymore. Doesn't really matter. 8F, this is the start and the end of the line width. Great. Alright, now the next thing I want to do is I want to make sure that if the mouse button is pressed, or is down, sorry, that the position count position count of the line render is multiple, so 2. And so that's really easy. Just go line renderer dot set set position. Oh, sorry, that's actually not right. So to do that, you just go lr dot position count, and here we just go a value for the number of positions. So here we want 2. Obviously, we want the player and we want the object. That's super simple. And then if we're grabbing, we want to go ahead and make sure that the position 1, so set position, and then 0, which is position 1, because of course in programming, 1 is 0, we start at 0. Actually, I might make that the second position. Actually, I think that makes more sense. I'm going to make that the closest transform dot position. Great, so that should always be like that. And then out, sorry. And then outside of that, we want to make sure that position 0, whoa, position 0 is the player's transform. And the last thing we want to do here is we want to go down to up, and we want to make sure that if the mouse button's up, that nothing's attached. So we don't want to have any kind of line if the player isn't hooking onto anything. So we'll go position count again. Always mess that part up. Equals nothing. So when we're not doing anything, we don't want any lines. Great, this should work just fine. I'll just double check that by running it. Great, so now you notice that there is a massive line to indicate when the player is hooking onto an object. I'll just go ahead and make that way smaller real quick. Actually meant to add another 0 there. Save that again. And then I'll hit play. Awesome. Alright, so it's not much. It looks a bit goofy, I think, because the player is so big. But this is the basic mechanic for creating a game with a hook. You might want to do things like add force, impulse, when the player hooks onto an object, so that you can sort of maintain momentum or build momentum as you move. This way you kind of will slowly move momentum until you can't go anywhere yet, or again, sorry, and you sort of eventually stop. But this is the really basic way to do a hooking game. And so this is the way that anyone can make a game. This is pretty similar to the way the Hookman or Stickman Hook Jump or whatever it's called is made. And so yeah, I hope that this was a helpful video to someone. Another cool thing you can do that's really simple is you can just go to the hinges and you can go use motor. I have to do it to all of them because I'm not instantiating them through code, and they're actually just separate objects in the scene right now. But this way you'll notice that the hinge affects the object as well. Awesome. All right. Well, yeah, thanks for watching. If you did, I hope that it was not too bad. And let me know if you wanted to see a full tutorial on how to make a full game. The game I made was kind of like an endless runner style, so it was just an ongoing score game with a high score, I guess. Let me know if that is interesting. Otherwise, I hope that this helped you add a hooking mechanic to your game. And yeah, thanks very much.